45 years ago, the Supreme Court issued one of its most controversial rulings. In Roe v. Wade, it enshrined the woman's right to privacy, or more broadly, a woman's right to abort a pregnancy. Along with its earlier ruling, Griswold v. Connecticut, the Supreme Court guaranteed the rights of contraception and the rights of deciding if a woman wishes to carry out her pregnancy. This is one of the most galvanizing and controversial issues which the Church and American society as a whole faces. In this video, we will be discussing ways which the Church can respond to this issue and specific problems and statistics concerning abortion and birth control. I'm Daniel Enger, and I'm a sophomore at Nyack and a history major.
I am Katherine Connolly, and I'm a pastoral ministry major.
So Katherine, what's your personal opinion on the use of abortion and birth control?
Birth control and abortion. Abortion has been sweeping the nation. There have been people picketing pro-life versus pro-choice. And so with abortion, you have the whole thing where it's like, thou shalt not commit murder, and we are killing unborn babies. And yet you also have the, it's my body, it's my choice. It's really important to know where to draw the line in that, because you have one side where it says you cannot control the will of God, and the other side that says, well, I think that this is what's best for my body, I know what's best. While I am pro-life, I also believe in pro-choice. I know it's contradictory because you can't be pro-life and pro-choice at the same time. Preserving the life of the unborn is really important. There are extreme cases where women may die in childbirth, or the child and the mother would die. Diseases such as AIDS, women being raped, and them having to bear the weight of this child that they didn't ask for. And so in those cases, personally, I am pro-choice. However, I am pro-life in the sense that we also need to be responsible. If a couple chooses to have sexual intercourse and they have a child, I think that there's a need to be responsible. Daniel, did your church ever have your position on abortion and birth control? If so, what was their stance, and would you say that you held the same stance?
I've had the blessing of growing up in a Christian home as long as I can remember, and all my churches have been involved in the pro-life movement. There's been whole buses who've gone to Washington with the March for Life, and it's something that as I was growing up I thought it was a very black and white issue. All my siblings and I were the result of high-risk pregnancies related to health issues. Doctors told my parents that they would recommend aborting us because we would have heart defects, or in my case they said I was deaf and I had Down syndrome. And thankfully I don't have any of those two things. While I wasn't a perfect baby, I had to have several surgeries on my feet. I'm so thankful that I'm here today. Even if I couldn't walk properly, or even if I was deaf or I had Down syndrome, I see people with these disabilities who have so much joy and give so much joy to others that I would never think of aborting someone because of an issue that they have or a genetic condition. There are also issues I could never imagine being in a situation where there would be a rape or something like that, and I would never want to force someone to be responsible for a life that they did not want. But while it's a rather long answer, I'm passionately pro-life. But since coming to Nyack, I've realized that there are sincere, devout Christians who have a much more inclusive stance on this issue that extends to keeping abortion legal in some circumstances. Going back to Katherine's question, my churches have all been more on the conservative side in this issue. You know, there's a right and there's a wrong, but we've always tried to seek out ways to help people, mothers and fathers and single women who are in need and who are in these unfortunate situations where they have to make this decision. So while we have a very clear-cut moral issue regarding this, we believe we must do all we can to help those who need help. And Katherine, congratulations on getting married this year.
Thank you.
I know we've seen pictures and it was a wonderful ceremony. Since this major change in your life, have your issues on these positions been altered at all?
Absolutely. This marriage really redeemed me in the sense that I'm the first to get married out of a family that doesn't believe in marriage. And so I grew up being surrounded by teenage pregnancy. I'd seen how my sisters had struggled with having children. I had been raised with believing that children are curses and they ruin your life. Getting married, I felt like one of the things that the Lord dealt with me was on this topic of abortion and birth control. And so, yes, personally, I'm a beneficiary of birth control, and it helps in regulating hormones. It helps with a lot of physical health issues. But I came to a point where I was confronted by the Lord, and I had to realize for myself that if my husband and I were to get pregnant as we were married, I cannot abort that child. I'd come to a point where I realized that children are a gift. I'd come to the point where I realized that even if we had a child, we wouldn't be alone in raising the child. It takes a village to raise a child.
So Katherine, with the Right to Life movement, we're all familiar with the marches on Washington and with the picketing outside of hospitals and with all the lobbying that goes in the state legislatures and in the Supreme Court. Do you believe that this is the best use of pro-lifers' time and money and resources, or should we spend almost all these resources on programs catering to women at risk and vulnerable women who are considering abortion as their only option?
I wonder how many lives would be saved and how many lives would be reached if they spent time actually doing the latter. What we're doing right now is condemning. There are people who are convinced that, well, according to Christians, I'm going to hell, and they're fine with it. And the truth is, I think there's such a need within the communities to know that the church, the reason why they're there is to help the community and to love the community, regardless of what state they're in. We're supposed to meet them where they are. We're not doing justice by just picketing and protesting. They don't care. Doing justice, there's a restorative factor to it. And there's a need to restore these people rather than to tell them that they're wrong. I think that there needs to be an additional follow-up step.
I love how Hosea says, let justice roll down like an ever-flowing stream, and comparing it to water and the restorative nature of that.
If the church is refusing to have a relationship with Planned Parenthood, then there's a need for the church then to begin establishing clinics then that will teach preventative measures, and not only that, but also provide the same things that Planned Parenthood does. We have been talking a lot about the role of the church with abortion. Now, what do you think the role with the government should be?
I know I have an opinion on this that probably a lot of people would disagree with, and I understand that we can't all agree on everything, but I believe the government's primary role is protecting the life of its citizens. And I strongly believe in the sanctity of life. And we see in Ireland, which has had for many years wonderful laws protecting the unborn, we've also seen sad stories of women who've had complications in pregnancy and felt there was no way out of that. So personally, I believe in very, very stringent laws against abortion, but I realize as I'm coming into contact with people, there's no clear-cut, easy solution to this issue, because if there were, we already would have had it, and we are still dialoguing and debating on it. Katherine, you are a proud New Yorker, and you've grown up in the Bronx and been quite familiar with New York City. One sad statistic from New York City is that it is the abortion capital of the United States. 37% of all viable pregnancies end in abortion. This is even higher in Katherine's home borough of the Bronx, which is at 45%, and this statistic is from the Expect Hope ministry. As a native New Yorker, do you have any insight into these statistics?
I think that these statistics have to do a lot with family issues. It has to do a lot with economic factors, access to clinics in a sense. Planned Parenthood made it more accessible to people with lower income because they also provide health insurance. There's such a need for sex ed in our education system, especially in the Bronx, because you have middle school having these encounters in school. They're learning about it from their friends, and I think there's a need to not just make it a one-day thing where if you miss it, then you miss it, but a year-long process where students learn about sex, they learn about the diseases, they learn about birth control.
In 2014, the Center for Disease Control stated that 85.5% of all abortions are from single women. During the same time, the Guttmacher Institute reported that while abortion rates have fallen overall, they have become increasingly concentrated among women below the poverty line. In 1987, 30% of all abortions were carried out for women under the poverty line. In 2014, this number jumped to 49%. Is there any way you think that the church can specifically respond to this issue and focus its ministry on what seems to be poor single women who are the most vulnerable to this?
New Life Fellowship in Queens has a clinic where they provide medical treatment for locals in Queens. Food drives, clothing drives. It's so important to be able to incorporate them as a part of our community rather than to shun them. As a future father and as a man, how would you say the church can keep the father of the unborn, the father in that relationship in the picture?
I feel the root problem is really generational. As you look at certain families and certain situations where there's an absent father figure, so the son has no one to emulate, the son has no male figure to look up to and to imitate, so then he turns to his peers on the street, or he really has no guarantee of someone looking out for him or watching over him. I feel as it's just as important to have ministries to the fathers out there as the single mothers. There's one church family that I've been exposed to in high school. I have many friends who go there. It's called the Bronx Household of Faith. They recently had a Supreme Court battle, not related to abortion, but they were meeting in a public school in the Bronx. And Mayor de Blasio did not believe that religious institutions should be using public school facilities. And they were in a really trying legal case that took years and years and years. But after that issue was resolved, they realized there was a strong need for a center devoted to single mothers and to family issues, as their neighborhood of the Bronx had an abortion rate of over 52%. And one of the main causes of that was there were so many women who had no male support, no fallback, no loving spouse or partner. And they set up a ministry called Expect Hope, which not only cares for the life of the unborn before the pregnancy, but welcomes the families into their church. For 2 years they have a place to stay. There's job training for the father and the mother. There's GED programs. And by really investing in the family for so long, and by loving in the family for so long, they really do their best to ensure these people have a stable footing after this pregnancy. And in terms of, there's no person can be a perfect replacement for an earthly father, but we can point to the Heavenly Father who loves us all. And it's time for us to man up and really try to be role models and reach out to these people who are in need and be there for them, and just not even talk or lecture, but just listen and help and serve. And I think the late teenage, early 20 years are really critical for older Christian men to try to be there for the next generation. I've had the blessing of a wonderful earthly father to imitate, and I've grown up in a Christian home and have had just so many opportunities that so many people in the Bronx never have had the blessing to have. But I know I would not be the same person if I did not have so many godly Christian men who I can try to live up to and imitate and emulate. And by the churches being open to the neediest people and to people facing these decisions, and by welcoming them in their families, we can do much to try to end the cycle of absentee fatherism and missing and single mothers doing this whole struggle by themselves. We see that there are no easy answers or ways out of this painful debate. But by talking today, we realize that there's much the church can do. Instead of lecturing people and judging them, we can be a shoulder to lean on and a hand of help. We can train up fathers in the ways they should go, and we can help orphans and widows and single mothers in their distress. Thank you for listening to us today and joining our dialogue on how the church can respond to the crises of abortion and contraception. Thank you.
Thank you.